back hordes. A simpleton, really. I'm sure his mind was fried when he got hit in the head back in the Chaos Age. Trying times, I'm sure you remember.
The Chaos Age, or the Age of Chaos, refers to either the late stages of the Skeleton's uprising against the First Empire, or the period of time after the Empire's collapse, but before the conception of the Second Empire. Likely, it is a mix of both. The length of the Age of Chaos is unknown, and could have lasted anywhere from hundreds to thousands of years. We don't know much about this period, and absolutely nothing of the specific events within it. But we know that the aftermath of the first extinction had several effects upon the world which may be important to note leading up to the Second Empire. Beyond the general mass devastation of the continent, which can still be seen in many regions today in some form or another, and the near extinction of humanity, we see that the continent itself may have drastically enlarged.
Used to be a great port city around here somewhere. Not anymore, though. It was a long time ago. The water level was a few hundred meters higher back then.
The sea level being hundreds of meters lower than it was before the calamitous event of the first extinction would have seen the land grow to accommodate much more space than previously available, with islands becoming peaks of hills and mountains in what are now the lowlands of coastal regions. Skeleton kind's own numbers appeared to have been drastically affected. The first reason for this is the noted mass suicide of skeletons, either during or in the aftermath of the first extinction as explored in the previous video. The other is the apparent inability to produce more skeletons, at anywhere near approaching the scale of what was previously possible, if at all.
Wonders of technology were produced here, in staggering quantities. Machines building more machines to build more machines with. In the end, they couldn't keep up with its hunger. This is where I was born.
This indicates that the factories visible in the floodlands were the First Empire's production facility of new skeletons. The fact that it was impossible to keep up with its hunger likely indicates that either the resources or technology required to produce the skeletons in these facilities was lost or in too short supply, and so production was halted. Or simply the facilities were destroyed by the events of the first extinction, or the violent and turbulent unknown events throughout the Age of Chaos. Whatever the case, it certainly indicates that production did in fact cease. This means that, as far as is known, no new skeletons were being produced from this point onward, as no other regions or nations are acknowledged for producing them. The skeleton race was thus not able to reproduce, while no doubt losing population to violence, natural disaster, and the apparent common practice of suicide in this time period. Their race, while likely far outnumbering the decimated humans at this stage, had begun its path to irreversible decline in population. This is the situation from which the Second Empire was conceived. The skeletons that remained still wallowed in remorse. This endured through the indeterminate but seemingly considerable amount of time that was the Age of Chaos. However, eventually it appears that the skeletons surmised that perhaps they could absolve themselves of their past actions by guiding and protecting the remains of humanity. It was under these good intentions that the Empire's first found its feet. The founding members of the old Empire sought to undo the crimes and errors of skeleton kind and redeem themselves to mankind, though the humans had long forgotten any of it. The founders of the Empire included one of, if not the greatest of the skeleton warriors, Catlan. We hear of his prowess even today from the whimsical reminiscence of skeleton kind comparing him to the renowned warriors of modern times.
All this talk of the Bugmaster in this day and age, it never gets old. Forget Igor, the Stone Golem, Ark, all the legends. They don't compare to Catlan.
Catlan was admired by other skeletons, presumably for his prowess and leadership abilities, and would quickly style himself as the emperor of the new empire they were forming. Judging by apparent growth and infrastructure we see in the signs of the former Second Empire territory, it is likely Catlan was competent at government in these early stages. Alongside him, we know of one other likely founding member in this endeavor, Tinfist. It is suggested that the two worked closely together and were likely close themselves, and therefore that Tin Fist also held a high position in the Empire.
Tin Fist and Catlon made a great team.
They established themselves in the southeast of the continent, the same area of the continent in which Stobe surrendered his life in exchange for those of humanity all those years before. Whether this was intentional, necessary, or purely coincidental, it is unclear. Their capital was constructed in what would become the Ashlands, and the region soon became a heavily industrialized metropolis, judging by the vast and numerous ruins of the Second Empire's unique ashland architecture covering the region. It is not clear whether this was established before humanity joined the Empire, or if humanity joined immediately and aided in this endeavor. But what we do know is that humanity was inevitably part of the nation, both by the aforementioned reasoning for establishing the Empire and through the following events. As to the caste system of this empire, as opposed to that of the First Empire in the previous video, we do not need to speculate as to who occupied more powerful positions in the society. The skeletons were certainly the governing caste, although presumably styled themselves in such a position in order to protect the humans under them. To this end, it would appear that the formidable police force was established, as well as the military orders dedicated to protecting humanity within the Empire from harm, most notable being the Hydraulic Knights, led by General Zhang. General Zhang, leader of the Hydraulic Knights. They fought on the front lines to protect the Empire from cannibals and pirates. Their heroism is legendary. The presence of pirates suggests that at this time the Second Empire still had access to surviving aquatic vessels, which we know were popular during the First Empire. Are you saying the whole world was flooded?
Relatively, yes. People loved their boats back then.
The threat of piracy seems to indicate that seacraft may have returned in this new secure empire as trade cogs in transport or recreational vessels, giving us further glimpses of the Second Empire culture, economy, and infrastructure. While the Second Empire was predominantly established in the southeast, it appears that theirs was not the only culture on the continent at this time, and another such culture revolved around practices which directly opposed the Second Empire's goal of safeguarding humanity. At some point, either during the Age of Chaos or the establishment of the Second Empire, human tribes in the northwest of the continent, their society transformed into a primitive state, becoming cannibalistic and raiding, consuming humans that they encountered.
It wasn't always like this. We don't know why the Northwesterners suddenly developed a taste for humanoid meat.
Their degradation could be put down to toxic environmental factors, which they were unable to adapt to. Damaging substances from their own labs, induced madness from experiments gone wrong, or simply being reduced to cannibalism due to severe famine.
On a side note, famine is incredibly unlikely. When looking at the game files for Kenshi, the Cannibal Plains do retain a high level of fertility, meaning that famine is incredibly unlikely, as well as other factors that I will discuss later on. The battles against these tribes was inevitable, and Catlon tasked General Zhang and his Hydraulic Knights with the task of curbing these cannibal incursions, as we can see from the description above of Zhang's CPU. These military campaigns were likely extensive and impressive in scope, as even cannibals today appear to have had the events seared into their collective memories, likely passed down orally through generations, mistaking any skeleton as Hydraulic Knights, or possibly for General Zhang himself.
Oh, the inedible ones. The inedible one returns. Protect the Grand Wizard, the one which cannot be eaten.
Not much else is known about these conflicts aside from the fact that they occurred. It is clear that the cannibals were not utterly defeated, as they persist in the same region even to this day, and this may be due to the Hydraulic Knights fulfilling a purely defensive and protective role rather than invading cannibal lands, or perhaps simply that the cannibals' numbers were a match for the Hydraulic Knights' skill, and the conflict was a constant factor throughout the Empire's history. It would appear that the Second Empire, after an indeterminate amount of time, dabbled in genetic manipulation. Specifically, it would appear that said manipulation was performed upon humans, perhaps willing participants, to make a class referred to as the Enforcers. The Enforcers were stronger and tougher than regular humans, and were the progenitors of the modern-day Shek, although it would seem that they only began growing their horns after the time of the Second Empire.
What is that? An enforcer? The enforcers were always spiky in character. How humorous that they now sport true spikes to match. They calm horns now? Time stands still within our walls, but outside, a new world grows and evolves.
Shek are still acknowledged by skeletons as humans to this day.
Why are you here, human? There's nothing for you here.
The purpose of these enforcers is unknown, but their names suggest either a military or public order focus, perhaps both. Their creation may be due to the quickly growing human population making it increasingly difficult for the static, or decreasing, amount of skeletons to properly police. Or their creation may be due to the events which we will describe next. A portion of the humans within the Empire seem to have participated in a cult, which evidence suggests began with the veneration of Stobe, a skeleton behemoth that saved humanity from extinction. The evidence for this can be found in the previous video on the First Empire, linked below. And so, in the interest of avoiding repetition, reference to this considerable likelihood can be found there. It is unclear when the cult began, and the original incarnation may have indeed arisen during the Age of Chaos, when the memory of Stobe was still fresh, and therefore already existed during the rise of the Second Empire, its members being incorporated into the Empire's human populace. At any rate, over generations, as memory of the events of the First Extinction faded, the names involved were forgotten, and it appears that Chytrin became the moniker of their supposed savior. Some okranite writings used in this section, despite the obvious changes they have undergone over generations, transform from accounts of fact into parabolic scriptures. However, as noted in the previous video, these are to be interpreted in the form of their original ancient basis.
The okranite inscriptions, although rather eccentric, are some of the oldest legible texts salvaged to this day, and may offer a useful insight into the history of the ancients.
With this in mind, such writings will be used in combination with what we know of the events from other available sources to depict as accurate an account of the following events, which shaped the history of Kenshi moving forward. It would appear that the cult's belief vilified a perceived enemy as well as venerating Stobe.
Chytrin was split in two, reborn, one of light and one of darkness. Together, two gods would exist in equilibrium. Okran, god of day, warmth and renewal. Narko, god of night, cold and destruction.
Knowing that Chytrin was Stobe, a skeleton venerated for forgiving humanity and saving them, it is likely that the aspect of Okran refers to the memory of him, who then, in a cult, remembered the actions of Stobe, and held him up as a god of all that is good. Would that same cult remember the bringers of night, cold, and destruction? The obvious answer is that Narko is the religious aspect of what originally referred to the skeletons who orchestrated the first extinction.
Born out of the darkest depths of the world came Narko, the Shadow. She sought to erase all that is good, if not for our savior Okran. The agents of darkness infest the world as unholy vermin, the darkness that caused the world's first extinction.
The cult being integrated into the Second Empire, an empire governed and administrated by skeletons, would therefore have been likely the cause to some degree of tension. Despite this, it would appear that the cultists were, at the time, followers of a peaceful doctrine, perhaps following an example to Stobe himself.
Let us not yearn for the pleasures of the flesh, but yearn only for the love of our Creator and the well-being of all mankind. Let us not be tempted by self-serving lures and sexual misdeeds, intoxication, theft, and wrong speech. Let us show kindness to our brothers and sisters. Never harm them. Never feel envy or animosity towards them.
This would inevitably change. Whether the cult first antagonized the Imperial government, or whether it was the government which first applied force upon the cult is unclear. However, one way or the other, tension between the two steadily grew. This is when Catlan made the first of many mistakes, and demonstrated a heavy-handed nature of his rule when challengers arose. He tasked the police force with combating the cult directly, with force. CPU of General Hat 12, who was the chief of the Empire Police. He launched a crackdown on the new cultists, but his heavy-handed approach only fueled the blame and confusion further. Things escalated faster.
Narcos spawn were ravaging our world, creating out of hate and malice. Against mankind, her dark agents were hurled.
The new, more violent and restless elements of the cult were therefore validated. The skeletons were proving them correct. They wanted to silence the cult, oppressing their beliefs and destroying their membership, just as they attempted to destroy humanity so long ago. The cult began fighting back against the oppression, and soon a figure amongst them rose to lead the rebellion for freedom from the Empire, a figure that became known as the Phoenix.
In our darkest moments came the brightest light, the Phoenix. Okran had sent us a champion, one that would restore our faith and banish the shadow. Phoenix came with the everlasting sacred flame, the promise that man would once more live free. He saved us from both shackles and bestiality, and united as one with the holy bindings. One by one, the Dark Ones were now slain by the blade of our restored faith.
It is interesting to note that bestiality is referenced here as something the cultists were escaping. Given what we know, this seems to align well with the genetic manipulation of humans, converting them into enforcers, who the purest cultists likely did, and indeed in the modern age still do, think of as subhuman beasts. Lending further credence to the likelihood is the following.
The Horned Devil was created human, as brothers of okranite, but the Horned Devil possessed a sinful mind. It rejected Okran's light in its heart in favor of Narco's temptation.
Being saved from such bestiality also suggests a possibility that the fear of being made into an enforcer, or of the enforcers themselves, may have been an influencing factor for the building of tension between the cult and the Imperial class, although no further information is available on this point. It should be noted that in modern Okranites refer to the Shek as servants of darkness, telling us such things as,
I have seen ungodly atrocities committed by your kind. Your kind has deep links with the Dark Demoness herself. War is an ugly thing, but my pure-blooded brothers are at risk as long as they cavort with beasts like you.
This may suggest that the enforcers were in action before and during the time of the cult's uprising, and were used against the cult, which, in turn, may explain the Okranite religion's continued mistrust and contempt for non-humans who have been altered from their pure forms into beasts. Whether or not the enforcers played a part in the events, it is clear that the cult succeeded in fighting its way out of the Second Empire, and went on to settle in the central northwest as what would become the Holy Nation. The Phoenix, whose true name has been long forgotten, declared on his deathbed that he would be reincarnated as the first Okranite male born after his death, and the title Phoenix is likely attributed to this notion of being reborn upon death. This is a process and belief that has been repeated for every Holy Lord Phoenix since. The exact timing of the rebellion is unclear, but it seems very likely that it did not coincide with the actual collapse of the Empire. We are told by the Armor King, a skeleton armor store owner, that
I started this shop in the Second Empire town of Ketch. It was a thriving market town growing very strongly. I am proud to say this shop has been up and running for 937 years.
We therefore know that the Second Empire was not only standing, but flourishing, at least economically, 937 years before the current age. However, we also see that the current Lord Phoenix, Holy Lord Phoenix 62, blessed be his name, is the 62nd individual to hold said title. This means that the first Phoenix was 62 generations previous, a scale of time which would greatly predate the opening of the Armor King's store in the booming Second Empire town. This means, then, that the rebellion predated the Empire's collapse, potentially by some time, and likely caused or intensified the measures which would come next under Catlan's rule. The events of the cult uprising would seem to have had an effect on Catlan. Whether his intentions were good, he treated the cultists with a heavy hand and an oppressive regime, but he would not see the errors of his ways. If anything, the uprising made things worse for those humans who were not in the cult, and those who were but were against the uprising and who remained in the Second Empire. Catlan, it would seem, became paranoid and afraid. He turned the Empire's resources against its own people. The Hydraulic Knights, once protectors of humanity in the Empire, were transformed into brutish proprietors of violence and executions against the downtrodden populace. As time went on, the label pirate became thrown around more and more gratuitously. They found they were killing more of their own people than the real pirates were. For reasons unknown, perhaps as leverage against perceived insurgents, or simply as a testament to the extreme degree of Catlan's paranoia, and transition from a fair and blunt ruler to a total oppressive dictator, he also ordered for human children to be taken and incarcerated. Rhinobot just wanted to help, but he had no moral processing, and so he would help with anything, even the most diabolical evil. He didn't see anything wrong with his child prisons. Catlan demonstrated his inability to understand humanity, or to learn from his mistakes. His reaction to a great uprising caused by applying pressure and oppression upon his citizens was to apply further pressure and oppression upon his remaining citizens. Catlan and his regime had become the very thing which he and skeleton kind as a whole had themselves rebelled against so many years prior, a group which was dominated by fear of reprisal, and who would set out to cause great harm to those they were supposed to protect simply to satiate that fear. It seems that at this stage some of the skeletons realized this great hypocrisy and could see the dangerous slope they were quickly slipping towards, again, and attempted to aid humanity in some capacity. In reaction to this, Catlan executed his grandest hypocrisy yet. He took away the skeletons' free will, reduced them to nothing but lobotomized servants to eliminate his fear of making their own decisions simply because their decisions would have opposed him. And I'm sure that sounds familiar.
I had to throw them all. Traitors siding with the humans. Treason!
Catlan, the great warrior and noble leader, was gone. His mind was broken by paranoia and fear, and only the visage of a mad dictator remained. The situation continued for a time until a final event occurred which would prove to be the death knell of the Second Empire. A great famine struck the land. Not only oppressed and abused, the human populace of the Empire was now also starving. It proved to be the final burden that they could bear. He could never have foreseen the events that happened, but he still blamed himself for the famine and the subsequent downfall of the Empire. Regardless, the entire Empire collapsed under the strain. The humans that remained scattered, largely either to the Holy Nation or to form cities which would eventually unite to form the United Cities Empire. The Enforcers went to an exodus to the Sten Desert and the surrounding regions. Many skeletons seem to have also abandoned the Empire, striking out on their own or in groups, with some settling in a new city that was safe from the vengeful human factions. Even Tinfist, Catlan's friend and co-founder of the Empire, left. It was not an occasion of great upheaval and violence, but rather a collective giving up of the populace, who would abandon any notion that Catlan had their best interests at heart. How did the Second Empire end?
It just sort of rotted, fell apart. A mental disease, very strange. Not at all with the First Empire.
The First Empire? What happened to that? How did the First Empire end? But Catlan remained in the capital. He sat upon his throne, surrounded by thoughtless automatons he turned his people into. and watched the Empire crumble. The structures collapse and decay. The ash from the nearby volcanoes coat the land until it was unrecognizable to anyone who had seen it before. The skeletons that remained would see their CPUs burn out, losing their minds and clinging to life over hundreds of years. Looks like it had been damaged from overheating. It's a miracle the skeleton was still alive. All the while, Catlan remained in his throne room, still consumed with nothing but fear and anger. And through all of this, one thing is clear. He didn't learn a thing.
Has my judgment come so soon? I had to throw them all. Traitors, siding with the humans, treason. Now we are nothing. What was the point of it all? Have you tried looking after humans? They're monsters. As they grow in number, so does their capacity for evil, and they don't even notice when they do it. I was not the monster. We all fought valiantly for justice. We all endured chaos. We all mourned our lost comrades. The world looked a little brighter after we prevailed, but we were blinded by its false light. Even Catlan, ruling with a light heart and a heavy grip, had orders slip between his fingers. He was our hero, but he became our enemy, and we were plunged back into blackness.
The Second Empire was finished. It had set out to right the wrongs of the past, and had instead wholeheartedly repeated them. Catlan's reign served only to solidify any mistrust and hatred the other races showed to the skeletons. And that is unfortunately the legacy of what had the potential to be a glorious and lasting nation. The world was now forever splintered. Hey everybody, Hero in his head here. I just wanted to take a quick minute to thank Reddit user Just Joeying for giving me permission to use his original Reddit post as the script for these videos. So I'll go ahead and put that on the screen, and I'll post the link to the original Reddit post in the description below. So go ahead, pop over to Reddit, give him some upvotes. And I also want to thank Fiverr user Miramal Art for the fantastic background art. She absolutely knocked it out of the park. So go ahead and pop over to her and show her some love. And if you guys haven't seen the original video, I'll post the link in the description as well. So other than that, it's been fantastic, guys, and I really enjoyed these projects here. And hope to do more in the future. It's been fun. Catch you in the next one.